Hi, welcome to Mug with Erin. I'm Erin. This is my mug. This is my other mug. And I have a couple other mugs in the studio with me today. This is Stephanie Miller. I've got her mug, and she might have a mug, a coffee mug too.
I do.
Yay,
Oh, there we go.
producers. Yay, Hope Writers.
Yay, Hope Writers. Shout out to Hope Writers.
Yay. Mine is a book mug um, made by our pottery studio here in French Camp. And I love it. It's the shortest mug I have.
I love
But
that.
you can just refill it. When it gets
Yeah,
empty, you just put more coffee in.
that's right.
Stephanie, we're so glad to have you here today. Of course, Stephanie's a fellow Hope Writer, but also she's taken part in this series, Where is Jesus When? And today we get to hear her story of a difficult situation that she walked through and how she felt God's presence. So, Stephanie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right. I guess this is the time where I get to do lots of talking now, right? Lots of talking. So I will start by saying that I'm so thankful to be here and I'm so thankful to share this story. And when I saw that Erin had put out kind of this, does anyone have a story that they want to share or feel that God is calling them to share? I sat on it for a little bit because I wasn't quite sure if this particular story fit in with the theme of where is Jesus when and feeling God's presence. But then during my quiet time one morning, God loves to just speak to us when we're journaling and kind of minding our own business and doing our own thing. He reminded me of this situation and this circumstance that I had with my oldest daughter. I have three kids. My oldest daughter, I had a circumstance when I was pregnant with her, which is the story that I'll be sharing a little bit later. But he reminded me of how it really was a miracle and the way that he saved the situation and he just acted in a miraculous way. And I had not given it that thought and I was afraid to put the label on it. And so I feel like today and in sharing this story, my hope and encouragement is that if there is something that is not explainable other than only God, then I just want to encourage you to label it as such. Only God could do this, only God could do that, and realize it and recognize it and praise Him for the miracle of Him showing up in your life as well. And so that's just kind of a little preview, just to let you know where my heart is at in sharing this and hoping that if you notice small little things that you might have brushed off as coincidences or really cool that they happen to work like that, and just honor them and call them out and recognize them as just God working in your life and orchestrating these beautiful, beautiful things. So, without further ado, my story is when I was pregnant with my first daughter. Her name was Abigail. I was pregnant with her. I was about 34 and a half weeks along. It was a Thursday, ironically, and it's a Thursday today when we're recording. And also because I'm a huge journaler, I actually have a recorded version that was written out. So I have fairly accurate, I would say, details and recollection of the story. But it was a Thursday morning. I was 34 and a half weeks pregnant. And I was getting up to attend it was called Protestant Women of the Chapel, PWOC for military women and military wives. We were former military. And so I was very connected in that organization, going to go to Bible study, pregnant Stephanie roll into Bible study, 34 and a half weeks pregnant. But that morning I ended up waking up with a terrible headache, the migraine. I was seeing spots in my vision, floaters. I was dizzy. Um, but apparently I still drove to PWOC because I was not going to miss Bible study. I really wanted to go to Bible study. And so I was there. And you know how when you have a migraine or your head doesn't feel well, like you look it and you feel it and people can kind of tell that your head is hurting. People automatically were like, Stephanie, what's wrong? And I was like, well, I have a really bad headache and I'm kind of seeing floaters and I'm getting dizzy and nauseous. And they're like, Stephanie, you need to go to the hospital. And because we were in military, like we could just go to the hospital on post. So it wasn't like we had to drive across town or anything like that. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go. I'm definitely not feeling well, and maybe if I go, I'll get some answers. So a really sweet lady there, she offered to drive me to the hospital on post. And so we go over there, and immediately we're just going to go into kind of like that urgent care ER section of the hospital. So not at the OB floor at that point, although I was sent there after I went to the ER. But first off in the ER doctor. And so they're talking to me. They're saying, well, you're 37 and a half weeks pregnant, or 34 and a half weeks pregnant. So you need to be seen on the OB floor. So then, like I said, we transfer to the OB floor. They're checking vitals. My blood pressure is a little high. They check an ultrasound. Baby is head down. Yay. Um, and then they also say, okay, I'd like a urine, not urine sample. So then I go and give them a urine sample, and they're like, okay, well, if there's any protein in your urine, fellow mamas, preeclampsia, they were testing for that, then we'll give you a call back. And so they're like, the best thing you can do is basically go home and rest. Well, my friend, after that lasted a couple of hours. We go back to the place where that Bible study was being hosted, and a couple people were there, and I'm filling them in on what's going on. And they're like, Stephanie, just go rest, take a nap, you'll feel better, drink a whole bunch of water, all the normal stuff you do when you have a headache and you don't feel well. So then I left her there, and I'm like, okay, well, on the way home, I did start feeling a little bit better. So much, and this is funny, so much the fact that I decided to go through the Chick-fil-A drive-through. So clearly I needed Chick-fil-A, and I thought that that was going to, help me feel better. So I was going through the Chick-fil-A drive-through, and it's so funny that like vivid images of this are coming back. And I had just gotten my food, number one, chicken sandwich, nothing fancy. And then I got a call from that OB that I was just at. And they were like, Stephanie, your protein, see, that's why I wanted to call and combine those other words earlier. The protein in your urine is extremely high. You need to go to labor and delivery now. Well, I was not expecting that. I was starting to feel a little bit better, and I was going to enjoy my Chick-fil-A and go home and take a nap. And so that really threw me for a loop. So I didn't know really how to react at that moment. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go to labor and delivery, because that's what they told me to do. Now, a side note, I wasn't allowed to, they didn't deliver babies on the hospital, on the military post. I had to go to an actual hospital in the town. So that's where I was going. I was going to the hospital in the town, reconnected with my friend, and told her, hey, I was told I need to go here and to labor and delivery here. Will you meet me here? And she did, of course. And at this point, I don't even think I had texted my husband and had clued him in on anything, because I'm kind of along the lines of like, if I don't know any answers, I'm not going to tell you anything to make you worry excessively. And so I'm like, well, I don't, this will all work its way out. I don't really feel the need to kind of let him know what's going on. So I sat in a parking spot at Chick-fil-A, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna enjoy my chicken sandwich before I drive over to the hospital. So,
I was going to ask
so
that.
yes, I know. I know. Well, who knows what I'm gonna eat again, right? So I'm like, I got it in. So I enjoy my Chick-fil-A sandwich, and then I drive over to the hospital. My friend meets me there. We follow the course of action, and they were like, so and so had called, and we were expecting you to come in. Here's triage, all of the things. By this point, my headache had returned, right? My headache had returned, and not that it had gone away, but it definitely intensified. And my blood pressure was moderate in when it was being taken at that OB office on post. But my blood pressure was considerably higher when I was at this new doctor's office. To be expected, right? Honestly, because you're worried, you're anxious, you're fearful of what's going on. I had never experienced this before. So my blood pressure was creeping up into the we don't really like this territory. And apparently with the protein in my urine, that was also a concern for them for preeclampsia. So much the fact that when I first saw the doctor that was on call, he came in and he said, get ready to be induced. We're going to induce you. I'm like, well, I'm 34 and a half weeks pregnant. I'm not ready to be induced. This is not part of what I want. This is not part of the plan. Um, and so I was like, well, I need to talk to my husband. Like, I'm not going to make any of these decisions without my husband being here. And he's like, okay, but we did this other test for your reflexes. Apparently, preeclampsia, another sign of it in the more advanced stages is actually an increased reflex response. And so they said I had that. And so they were very concerned at that moment that I needed to be induced and that I was becoming a danger to myself and a danger to my baby. Well, by the grace of God, I can't even explain it other than that. But by the grace of God, I put that off, even though the pressure was really, really intense for me to be like, okay, yes, like induce me, let's start the process because I want what's best for me and my baby. But I put it off because my husband wasn't there at the time. So they understood that. And so my blood pressure was still creeping up. I mean, I think it got into, I had written down like the 150s, 160s. I mean, it was high on that time, but it wasn't alarming high, but it was high for 34 and a half weeks. And then having that protein in the urine and things like that. So all of that to say, they're telling me you need to be induced. I'm like, I'm going to wait for my husband. I'm not making any decisions without him. And he comes in at some point, I think I had texted him what was going on. He comes in, and then right as he comes in, we move from triage into an actual room. And then I get this nurse that just comes in and she's like, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but she just comes in and she's like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to, you do what's best for you. You do what you feel. And I really needed that advocate to come in and say, if this doesn't feel right, don't do it. You can follow the voice within and not have to feel like you are required and you have no other choice, because you do have a choice. And so that was just such a great relief for me that she was already being like, I see that you don't want this, and I want to help support you in any way that I can. So she helped me come to the conclusion, especially after the doctor came in. And we're going to wait it out. I was monitored. I said, I'm not going to fall for the induction right now. I prefer to wait and see. And they're like, well, we're going to collect then a 12-hour urine sample continuously, and you're going to be here for overnight so we can do that. And then, we'll see how things are in the morning. Meanwhile, in their head, that they're thinking, lady, your protein in your urine is high. Like, it's not going to magically go away. You need to be induced. Like, why are you delaying the inevitable? But with the nurse's encouragement to be okay, to speak up and to say what I felt and to say what I thought was best for me and my baby, I was able to opt for that option. And surprisingly, when I was out of that high pressure situation of having the doctors be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I had that calming voice of the nurse being like, it's okay. My blood pressure dropped down, right? It went normal. And it stayed normal throughout my whole rest of that stay. I never had another higher reading again with that blood pressure. Um, but the real kind of meat or the climax or the main point of this particular instance where I felt God's presence more than ever was when it was the middle of the night, and everyone else, my husband was asleep and I couldn't sleep. I had all these monitors on me, right? I had to get up every couple of hours to go to the bathroom and, pee, because that's what you're supposed to do when they take the sample. But I had all these monitors on me and I was tossing and turning and trying to get comfortable. And at that point, I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. In terms of, was I going to end up being induced anyway? Was I going to be fighting for this and just delaying the inevitable like they basically had told me? But then they decided, I'm sitting there and it's the middle of the night and I decide to start listening to music. I'm a big fan of worship music, and I had the Pandora music station on. And two songs that came on were Do It Again by Elevation And I don't remember the other one. And I put my journal back. It was Do It Again by Elevation. And then it was another one. Probably Great Are You, Lord is another one that's very significant to me. And I just remember just feeling like that, that anxiety, that nervousness of what's to come. Do I need to induce? Do I need to listen and follow this? Kind of just melt away at that point. I started to get the contractions started coming, and they were probably Braxton Hicks, but as my first baby, first time being pregnant, I thought they were real contractions, and I was like, okay, Lord, like I'm not ready, but you're gonna make me ready. And so I remember just like laying there in that hospital bed, listening, having that music in my earphones and just listening to that and just letting those words and that truth wash over me. So much the fact I was like, Lord, I'm not ready, but you are. Like, I'm just surrendering and honoring and obeying what you want. Completely letting go of my desire to, have that natural birth that I really wanted, which was also kind of leading to me being like, no, I'm not going to be induced. I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. But I really feel like when I released that over fully, that God just came in and he gave me this unexplainable peace and this unexplainable calm where I just remember like my whole body was relaxed at that moment.
Wow.
I had just felt so, it's like when you're holding tension and you're holding your jaw or clenching and you don't even realize you are. But then at that moment, there was just such a release of everything. And I, I just remember feeling, my daughter at the time, in my stomach, like moving around like crazy. And then the contractions stop. And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess, I'm not going to go into labor naturally. So we'll see what else is to come. So I fall asleep. And then, when you're in the hospital, they don't ever let you sleep for like long periods of time. It's kind of like coming in like every 45 minutes or an hour, checking vitals and, switching all things around. But I fall asleep. And in the morning, it was like 7 or 8 in the morning, I had filled it up to the sample, what they needed to. So then they were going to go analyze it, look at it, whatever, and come back. There was a 4-hour window between them collecting that sample and then me actually getting the results from that. But finally, when the doctor came back, he was like, I don't understand it. And I had the numbers written down, so I remember. I don't understand it. When you came to the doctor yesterday, your protein was at a point 0.5 in your urine. The normal is 0.02. And so I was like, okay, well, does that mean like I can go? And he's like, yeah, you can go, but I don't understand how your protein level was so high yesterday and then now it's not. And I was thinking to myself, well, I know why. But, it's amazing when we release and we surrender the outcome for what we want and we just allow God to provide what he wants to provide for us. Because I feel like that I was given that angel, honestly, of a nurse that was like, you don't have to do this. And then because I feel that I was, let the worship music and let his truth wash over me and just allow his presence to just surround me, that I was given that peace. And I do firmly believe that the miracle is that he healed me from the preeclampsia, because I ended up going all the way until my actual due date. And I had my daughter at, I think, 40 weeks and 1 day. So I ended up, from that scare at 34 and a half weeks to having her at 40 weeks and 1 day, and not a sign, not a blip of any preeclampsia after that.
Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. I love the way you described those moments in the middle of the night with you and the Lord,
Yeah.
and just the way he washed over you is just the peace.
Yeah.
Um, and that peace in those situations is that unexplainable peace. It's
Yes.
the only explanation is the Lord.
Yes. Yes.
Wow, I love that. And I feel like with uh the development of babies, in our womb, everything's so fragile. And it's a picture, I think, I mean, all of life is fragile.
Yeah.
When we're out of the womb, it's fragile, but we forget because then we're like, oh, we're in control and we've got this. And but the Lord's just as active in our everyday life outside the womb.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I'm so glad he gave you that nurse to kind of put the brakes on.
Me too. Me too. Because as much as I love my husband, and I do, he definitely errs more on the side of not wanting to speak up. You know, he has kind of a medical-ish background, and so he's very much like whatever the doctor says you
Right.
should do. And so yeah, to have a nurse be like, "Hey, guess what? You do have a choice. Despite the way that they're making you feel, you do have a choice." And so just someone to be like, "You don't have to do this." I was like, "Okay, then I'm not, there has to be another option." So,
Right. Well, good. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that.
of course.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. That those middle of the night times are can be scary, but also can be so sweet with the Lord. Um,
Yeah, I think the main thing with that is not necessarily surrendering what is bothering us and what our hurt, worries, and fears are because we're hoping for a miracle and expecting a miracle, but we surrender it because we stop focusing on the outcome and we stop focusing on what we want to happen. And then we say, okay, Lord, not my will, but yours. And I really feel like in that moment, I was, okay, Lord, not my will, but yours. I was holding on tightly, like I said before, to that birth plan that I had, originally. But after that worship music and after just feeling his presence just kind of surround me, it was, okay, Lord, not my will, but yours. And your way is the best way.
mm, and that's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah.
So beautiful. Wow. Well, so if one of my listeners out there is hearing this, and I'm sure that because we are human, there are many out there kind of struggling with um, letting go
Yeah.
or struggling with that hanging on tight to what we want. What words of encouragement would you have for them today?
Yes. So I think I think it has to, I'm going to give you like a mental picture here. So, what happens if we are trying to hold on to sand really, really tightly? What happens if we try to hold on to sand really, really tightly? It slips through our fingertips, right? So, sand is going to slip through our fingertips. If we hold on too tightly, things are actually going to get by and we're not going to be able to hold on so tightly to what we need. So the best thing in order to be able to grab onto and have what God wants for us is to open handedly hold on to sand. I can gather more sand with my hands, maybe because I play in sandcastles, right? When we go to the beach with the kids, like I can gather more sand with open hands than I can with tight closed hands. And so I feel like in terms of letting go of an outcome that you are hoping for or an outcome you are thinking, or even in the state of just uncertainty where you don't even have an outcome in mind, but you're just letting fear control you. I think my encouragement would be to just open up your hands, and release what it is that is keeping you back. Release that it has to be this way. Release that expectation. Release that that plan that you have, and just allow God to come in and do his work in you and do his work through you, and allow him to show you and guide you to the better way, which is ultimately his way. Jeremiah 29:11 holds a special place in my heart as well, which we know that verse, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. Actually, as I said that, I cannot believe I didn't say this in my story. Isaiah 41:10 was a verse at night that I was reading over and over again. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. I, the Lord, will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And I know that's not exactly it word for word, And that was the verse that I clung to in those moments of uncertainty of, am I going to be induced? And is the baby going to be okay? Um, and that was the verse. And so interestingly, I'm connecting the dots as I'm sharing this with you all, that then I then use the analogy, right, of holding out our hands and releasing sand, because that verse also talks about, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. And sorry, that was a connection that I
I love that.
I did not expect.
Oh, and he was holding you in that moment,
Yeah,
and he holds us in all of our moments. He's right there with us
exactly.
in
Exactly.
those
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah. So I
That's
think the bigger picture is, how can we stop holding on so tightly and then allow God to uphold us as we release what it is that God is calling us to release.
yes.
So,
Ooh, amen.
yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, Stephanie, where are you out on the internet and all your writings? Where can we find you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, beyond someone who makes connections with Isaiah 41:10 hand and sand holding hand, I am a writing coach, which was probably a tip off with the mug that I shared earlier. Hope Writers certified writing coach, an author and a speaker. And one of the greatest privileges that I have is to help other faith-filled writers learn how to write and share their story with clarity, consistency, and confidence. I am active on Instagram. I'm active on Facebook, and the username is Stephanie Miller Coach, one word. So if you are a writer or you want to learn more about, what it looks like to share your story, I would love to connect with you on social media. My website and my ministry, my coaching ministry, is called Butterfly Beginnings. So I also am very heavily into this illustration of our spiritual growth and our creative growth being likened to that of the stages of a butterfly, where we have kind of an egg spiritually and creatively, up to the caterpillar spiritually and creatively, and then that chrysalis, that fun season, all the way up into the beautiful butterfly, and what it means to really live out as true transformed new creations in Christ. And so that website is butterfly-beginnings.com.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah.
You are a word picture person. I
I
love
am.
it.
I am. Like, God is all about the visuals, all about the visuals for me.
I love that. And I'll have the links in the video description so people won't have to try to write all this down for the video. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So fun. And did you have something for our listeners today?
I did. So I did mention that I'm a writing coach and a spiritual growth coach. And one of the things that I think really marries the two is understanding how you can write and share your testimony or your God-given story well. And when I say well, I'm not talking about, perfect grammar, spelling. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about writing it in a way that is not your story, your transformation, but it is God transforming you, writing it in a way that gives God the glory, in a specific instance where you have your circumstances, you have your struggles, but you can have this guide, this handout that tells you, okay, write out what you were thinking, what you were feeling, and what you were doing before you had that encounter with Christ, and then write out after. And so I would love to provide a resource for your listeners today that talk about how to write out your testimony. And so we look at sharing these threads of our lives and our circumstances. I think writing out our testimony is twofold. I think number one, it is beneficial for us when we're sharing about the gospel and we're sharing about the good news, and we can explain what Christ has done in our life. But number two, I think it's beneficial in a way that it gives us that written account of what God has done. And so even me just going back in my journal, which has a butterfly on it, it's over there in the bookcase, I see it. Even me just going back in my journal and just reliving that testimony and reliving that story was so powerful. And so I think when we learn how to write out our testimony and write out our story in that way, where we can see God show up, we not only connect the dots in where he's been faithful in the past, but then we can also use that, and it equips us and reminds us that he's been faithful then, He'll be faithful now, and then he'll be faithful over there. And over there is tomorrow, in case anyone.
Wow. Well, Stephanie, what would you say to the person who feels like they're not really the main character of their own story?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that God is the author of our story, but we really are the characters of our story. We have been given so much authority. We've been given so much courage. I think of that verse in Timothy. God did not give you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. We've been given all of that. And so God is creating the story around us and we are living it. And so if we stop, and there's a meme out there that says, God is still writing your story, stop trying to steal the pen. And I can attest to that 1000%. It's like, but I want to go this direction and I want to go this way. And so I think if you imagine another word picture, I know,
Love it.
I think if you imagine that there's some mighty hand of God that's writing your story and you are living out your story, you're letting go of the expectation, letting go of the assumption that it's all up to you. The main character doesn't write their own story, the author writes their own story. And then I'll even go one step further. It's when we share our own story, we become the narrator. So then we tell our story from the point of view that God gives us. And so that threefold idea of we are the characters living the story, we're also the narrators describing and explaining the story, but then God is ultimately the one that is authoring and writing our story.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's very powerful. Yeah. Wow. I love your word pictures.
I know. I'm glad you could resonate with them. Yeah. Yep.
Yes. Well, Stephanie, did you have anything else you wanted to add to our talk today?
Um, no, I think this has been great. I think I kind of started it at the beginning saying like I was so hesitant for a long time to call it a miracle that, my protein went from a 0.5 to a 0.02, in the matter of 24 hours. But ultimately, I feel like the peace of God, which transcend all understanding, guarded my heart and my mind. And I want to encourage those of you that might experience a situation that you're not really sure, and you're nervous about, really identifying a small miracle as such, to encourage you that if it was God, to just speak it out, go shout it on the rooftops, that God was the one that redeemed that situation or redeemed that circumstance, and just gave you that peace and that calm and that hope and healing, if that's what he did, throughout your situation today.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you for being with us today.
Of course. This was so fun. Thank you for having me.
It's really fun. And thank you for joining today. And we will see you next time on Mug to Mug with Erin.
Bye.